everyone, and welcome to another episode of Face Turn with Candace Cordelia. I am here with KiLynn King. And KiLynn, you might have seen her not only through her work with Mission Pro Wrestling, but also with All Elite Wrestling and many other promotions across the country. We are here for Mission Pro Week, which we've dubbed heretofore at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And I'm so excited to speak with you today, KiLynn. This is really awesome. It's been a long time coming for me for my bucket list, so I can't wait to get into it.
I'm excited to be here. It's really cool. I can't wait to get into it with you.
So let's get started. First of all, where are you from?
I am actually from where I hail from when I come out to the ring, Painesville, Ohio. So it's a little town. I want to say it's northeast. It's like 45 minutes northeast of Cleveland. So I was born and raised there. I lived there until I was 25 or 24. Yeah, 24 before I moved to Florida for wrestling. So born and raised Ohioan.
Wow. And what was it like growing up? I mean, is Ohio a really big wrestling state, or at least in your hometown, was wrestling really a staple of your growing up there?
So indie wise, like the area that I grew up in, there really wasn't a lot of wrestling. There is a lot of wrestling in Ohio, but I didn't realize that until I left Ohio. And then I was like, oh, I could have stayed there. But yeah, because I remember when I first started looking for places to go train, I had a buddy of mine. He made me this huge list of either schools or shows that were somewhat near us. And all the schools that I looked into, it was like these weird programs where you come train for like 2 weeks and then they'd be like, oh, okay, we'll put you on our show. And I knew nothing about wrestling at the time, but even I knew, I was like, that doesn't sound right. So I was like, all right, I need to look outside of Ohio to train. And then of course, like I said before, like once I left Ohio, a bunch of people were like, there's this place, this place, this place. It's like Ohio has got a lot of wrestling in it. And I was like, oh, well, now I know.
And isn't it always like that? Because, I'm from Philadelphia and I didn't know growing up just how big Philly was as a wrestling city until, many years later. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Like, how did I not know about this?
Right.
So I can relate, surely. So what was the moment for you where you decided, that you wanted to train and become a wrestler?
So I knew when I was a really young girl that I wanted to be a wrestler, but unfortunately, my mom and my dad weren't crazy about wrestling. Their introduction to wrestling was the Attitude Era. And my mom's first impression of wrestling was walking in and seeing girls having like a wet t-shirt contest. So she immediately, that's what her assumption was, especially towards women's wrestling. That's what she thought it was. So I just remember hearing such negative comments from her and just thinking like, okay, I'm not going to bring this up to the parents and let them know that that's what I want. So I kind of coasted for a really long time. I did what I was told, went to college and all that stuff. And then I think it was around, I want to say I was 22 or 23. Because once I turned 18, I got into martial arts, and that kind of, wrestling was always there. And then when I got into martial arts, that kind of like re-sparked the flame even more. And then by the time I turned like 22, 23, I just remember I was sitting in the middle of a college lecture and I was thinking about the match that I watched the night before. And I started to feel so much anxiety and I was sweating in my chair. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm like, if I am like so wrapped up in wrestling like this means that I have to do it. Like I wasn't even paying attention to the lecture. All I could think about was wrestling, and the idea of not being part of it just gave me so much anxiety. And I just remember that feeling overwhelming me. And I was like, yeah, no, I have to do this. So a few days later, I came home to my parents and I said, hey, I made a decision. I'm going to leave school and I'm going to start working a couple jobs and I'm going to save up and I'm going to become a professional wrestler. And didn't go over great. Parents were very upset for a while. Thankfully, now that I've gone out and done the thing and proved it's a legit thing that I want, they're behind me. But yeah, it was crazy. So like I as soon as I made that decision, like I said, I worked about 2-3 jobs, and then I continued my training at my martial arts schools and at the gyms and stuff like that. And within like a year or two, my brothers and we moved to Florida. And then within, I think, like 2 weeks of moving to Florida, I met somebody who trained at Team 3D Academy, which is where I originally trained at. And within a month, I was there training. It was crazy. It was like fate just once I made the decision for myself, it was like, all right, here you go. So that's how it all happened.
Oh my goodness. What did your group of friends think about this complete pivot going from college student to professional wrestler or professional wrestling training?
A lot of the people that were close to me at the time, they just wanted me to be happy. And a lot of the people that I hung out with the majority of the time were my martial arts buddies. So they were just like, yeah, do it. Because I had a background in theater and dance before I ever got into martial arts. So my one girlfriend, Sarah, she was just like, look, you've got theater, so you got the acting down, you've got dance, so you have body control. She said, you've been doing martial arts for the last 6 years, so you know how to fight. She's like, I feel like this is what is meant for you. This is destiny. So I said, you're right. And so they were definitely very, very supportive, which I think is a big factor in how I got through those 2 years of saving up and making it actually happen. Because like I said, my family was not happy for the longest time, but then thankfully going out and doing the thing, just improving myself, they finally got on board and were like, okay, as long as you're happy and you're thriving and you're doing what you love, we support you. And I was like, all right, cool. Thank you.
Wow. And going from Ohio to Florida, that's such a huge switch in culture.
Yes.
I mean, what was your first impression getting to Florida and being in that sunshine 24/7?
So this is going to sound ridiculous, but the first thing I noticed when we crossed, I think we were still technically in Georgia, but even in Georgia, once you cross there, all the differences start happening. I remember we were in the U-Haul truck and my brother was driving. And as soon as I woke up and I looked at the sky and I was like, oh my gosh, the sky is so blue. And he just started, because he had lived in Florida before. Like he used to be in the Marines. And when he left the Marines, he ended up living in Florida for a couple of years. So he wasn't new to it. He had been there before and he just started laughing. And he was like, yeah, it's crazy how different the world is outside of Ohio, huh? And I was like, the sky is so blue. The clouds are so fluffy. Like, it's just like the whole world turned to 3D. It was crazy. Because I always joke that Ohio is the gray state, because even in the summertime when it's hot, like the clouds are never true, or the sky is never truly blue. And the clouds are always kind of like thin and wispy. Not to hate on Ohio, but it was a huge difference. And I was like, oh, this is what the world looks like out of our state.
Yes. And then obviously, going from Ohio to Florida and then completely immersing yourself in wrestling as well. Talk to us about just the grueling nature of training and what that felt like for you, in your initial steps.
Yeah. So I was fortunate enough that before I got into wrestling, I played pretty much any sport I could get my hands on. And then, like I said, I did the martial arts style called Kwamukan Karate for about 6 years. And within that style, we also practiced judo, jiu-jitsu, and a weapons training, which is referred to as kabuto. Once I made the decision to go into wrestling, I was that crazy person who went on YouTube and looked up like all these different wrestling drills. And even though I didn't have a wrestling ring, I would like throw myself on our martial arts mats and like do bumping drills and all that stuff and practice my rolls and do all these crazy cardio drills. So I was somewhat prepared, but I will say like especially at Team 3D, like the drills that we had to do, I'm pretty sure that if I'd have gone from wrestling school and then gone straight into the military, I would have been fine. Because it was just, I'll give you a little taste. So like we would show up at noon, we would do like core workouts for like 20 some minutes. We would stretch and then we would get paired off. We would run these crazy cardio drills and then have to wrestle in between all of them, run some more cardio drills, take a break. And then we would get back into learning more wrestling and stuff like that. So we would be there for like almost 2 hours before we even locked up and did anything. Like we would just be going. And most schools, like you go into them, there's no AC. You're relying on fans. And like I started my training, I want to say it was like July, August in Florida, in the middle or in the back of this old school weightlifting gym with no AC, just two big fans facing the ring. Like you didn't even have to do anything. As soon as you walked into the building, you were sweating. So it was definitely a crazy experience training wise. But as crazy as it is, it prepares you so much for wrestling, because no matter whether you have a 5-minute match or 20, 30-minute match, like because of the training that they put me through, like I can handle it, you know, because you have to, because there's so many factors that go into putting a match together that you have to be able to have that cardio with you. That way, no matter what's going on, you can just keep going.
And I mean, your training has certainly put you in excellent stead, because ever since then, you've been working with some fantastic promotions, including Mission Pro Wrestling. And,
Yeah.
you know, we have to get into that. It's Mission Pro Week, right? And we're heading into the December 11th show, the last show of the year, going into 2022. A lot of wonderful things going on with the promotion. Talk to us about your initial impression of Mission Pro when you first made it, you know, to Texas, met Thunder Rosa, and got to know the rest of the roster.
Yeah. So I met Thunder through AEW. And I remember I had already been very aware of Mission Pro. My really good buddy Velvet had worked there a couple of times, and I remember her coming back and being like, "Oh, it's such a great place to work." And then I was fortunate enough that Thunder came up to me at one of our tapings and said, "Hey, we want to book you. Hit me up later on." And I said, "Okay." So I got brought in, and I got to wrestle Ray Lynn for the first time. And it's just from the moment you get there, there's so much camaraderie. It's crazy. Every single girl there just wants to put on a good show, just wants to represent women's wrestling in the most powerful, positive way. You know what I'm saying? That's what you see a lot of handshakes in Mission Pro. And there's a reason for that. It's because, yes, when we're in the ring, we want to win and we get hot sometimes. But at the end of the day, we all love and respect each other because we're all going on that same journey and putting ourselves, our bodies and our minds through the same insanity, you know? And so there's just such a love, you know, no matter what happens in that ring, there's such a love and respect between all of us in the locker room. There's never drama. It's always like, let's just show up and show out and show exactly what women's wrestling is and how we can break barriers and how we can take a women's promotion and make it one of the biggest and top-notch promotions in the world. And I think Thunder Rosa and everybody there has been doing such a great job with that, because I feel like every single time we come together, it just gets bigger and bigger, and the production just gets more and more. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a truly wonderful place to work.
And of course, there are other promotions that are predominantly, if not majority, women. You know, we're looking at Shimmer and Shine, etc.
Yes.
But what makes Mission Pro Wrestling superior, in your opinion, or at least more unique, I would say, in comparison to these other promotions? And also, not even just with women's wrestling promotions, but wrestling promotions overall.
I've actually never worked for Shimmer or Shine, so I don't really have an experience that I can compare it to. But what I do know is that it doesn't matter where you come from. If you're a woman out there on the indies busting her butt, Mission Pro wants to give you a chance to shine. And that's something really, really cool, because sometimes on the indies, it's about who you know to get on promotions. And with Mission Pro, it's not like that. It's, if you're out there putting out work, you're constantly promoting, showing Mission Pro that you know how to advertise yourself and other promotions that you're working for. They want you to come. They want to give you a chance. And I think that's incredible, because there's a lot of talent out there that the world has never seen or heard of. There are girls that have been out in the indies for 10 plus years. And until they came to Mission Pro, I'm ashamed to say it, but until they came to Mission Pro, I had never heard of them. But unfortunately, like, there's such a large pool of talent. And if you're not in the right state or the right time or have the right exposure, nobody really knows about you. And I think Mission Pro is doing a really great job of finding those hidden gems that nobody's really heard of and giving them a chance to finally get the exposure that they've worked so hard to achieve. So I would say that's probably one of the gems about Mission Pro, and that makes them stand out. And I think too, it's kind of fun that we kind of have the opposite formula where it's all women's matches and then one men's exhibition match. But even then, like, we find such crazy, awesome, amazing male talent. And it's just like, you know, even though all the fans there are all like, yes, we support women's wrestling, they still have so much fun when the men come out and they're like, all right, cool. It's just a very unique, cool formula, I think.
I love that. And you raise very intriguing points that make a lot of sense. And we're also entering in this stage, you know, we just released PWI, our Women's 150 rankings list. And there are just so many women out here that are wrestling, you know, and I've said this multiple times in other interviews that it was hard for us to even just keep it at 150. You know, it was.
I can only imagine.
A lot. I mean, in the next couple of years, y'all might see a PWI women's 200, 300, might be 500 at this point, because there's just so many, and that's a fantastic thing, right? So
absolutely.
Yeah. So with the roster that you have, that Thunder Rosa and Brian have cultivated at Mission Pro Wrestling, what is it like being around? I mean, you touched on this previous, but what's it really like being at the shows and having this camaraderie and putting these matches together and really putting on an amazing show for the people that are coming from, quite frankly, all over the country to see a Mission Pro Wrestling show?
I told Thunder this past weekend. I feel like Mission Pro has become that refresher for certain wrestlers' souls. I know there's a lot of times, like when we're out going show to show, that we kind of have this mindset: is it working? Are we going anywhere? Are people noticing? Like, those are the insecure questions that pop in our head all the time. And I feel like every single time we all come to Mission Pro, we're reminded, yes, people are noticing. Our hard work is paying off. Like, there's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why the girls who have become part of the main roster are a part of the main roster, because they are some of the hardest working girls out in the indies. And I just love seeing the different variety of women that we have in the locker room. No woman is the same. You know what I'm saying? We have people from Holiday to Maddie Rankowski to Jasmine Allure. Like, every single person has something different that they bring to the table. And it's such an incredible, diverse roster. And I can't wait to see how it continues to evolve and grow.
Mm-hmm. Likewise. And we're heading into a new year. And I know that there's going to be new things coming from Mission Pro Wrestling, and we can't wait to see it.
Yes.
What's one singular thing that you've learned from Thunder Rosa and being a part of this roster that you still take with you no matter where you go?
How does Holiday phrase it? Bangers only. I think sometimes it's really easy to just, you know, especially when we're having a mental rough time or our bodies are a little beat up, it's very easy to just be like, oh, let's just keep it simple. But whenever I'm at Mission Pro, I always want to give them my absolute best and show out. And like I said, it's a refresher. So it reminds me, like, no matter where I go, bangers only. We're leaving a mark. We're leaving history, because even when I'm not at Mission Pro, I'm representing Mission Pro. I mean, you go on the PWI list and you see my name. What are the companies that are mentioned? AEW, NWA, and MPW. So I think it's very important that Thunder Rosa always reminds us to keep pushing, to never settle, to never, okay, yes, we're getting attention and we're being noticed, but that doesn't mean that we are complacent. And also just to find a little bit of freedom in our wrestling. I know for me, for the longest time, especially when I was at AEW, and it was more about enhancement matches as opposed to, you know, just what's the technical term? The more meaningful, like, long matches. Mm-hmm. It's really easy to get set in having things called exactly. And I feel like whenever I'm around Thunder, she reminds us, like, hey, you have to remember that it's not about remembering spots. It's about remembering to entertain the people that are there paying the ticket. Mm-hmm. And so whenever I'm around her, she reminds me of that. And then I have more fun. There's more intensity in my work. I'm engaged with the people a little bit more. I'm more responsive to them as opposed to just getting through a match. And I think she definitely brings that out in me. And I think that I've found a lot more fire within myself and within my work since I've met her.
Absolutely. And that fire and intensity is what a lot of fans have loved to see from you, not just at Mission Pro, but of course with All Elite Wrestling. And we have to talk AEW, because within the past year and a half, with everything going on in the outside world, you know, you specifically have really shown, and fans are still to this day, they're like, what's up with KiLynn? Why isn't she being signed? What's going on? Like, so tell us, like, what, first of all, your impression of All Elite Wrestling when you first got there, and how being there has really helped to shape you as a wrestler.
Honestly, AEW is probably one of the coolest places to work, besides Mission Pro, of course. I remember when I first got there, because when your mind affiliates a big company with a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I first got there, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to be on my best behavior, make sure I shake everybody's hand and do all the things politically correct and all that stuff. And then when I walked in, I think Dustin was the first person I saw, and I went to go shake his hand, and I was being very like professional and serious. And he moved my hand out of the way, and he reached out and hugged me. And I was like, oh, hello, sir. And I was like, I'm KiLynn. He's like, I know who you are. I'm excited you're here. And that was my first impression of AEW. And it was just so wonderful and so pure. And then that night when I found out that I was actually going to have a match, I was in the ring with Penelope Ford, and I went back to the whole being serious and very professional. And Sunny Kiss was standing by the apron, and she leaned in towards me and was like, girl, calm down. We're so happy you're here. You are so welcome here. And so again, it was just another, just very kind and pure embrace. And it was my first time there. Nobody really knew who I was. And yet that was how they treated me. And it was like that ever since, even on the hard days where it's just like, I was trying to figure things out and trying to understand what my purpose was there. There was always people there that were like, we want you here. It's cool. Like, just keep working. People notice. And, so that's always just kind of been, again, it's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of kindness. And, because everybody there who works at AEW loves the product. They love the fans. We have some of the coolest wrestling fans in the world. And every single week, we just want to put on a great product that's really going to just keep their spirit in wrestling alive. And that's one of the really cool things about working there. So yes, I know fans get a little crazy that I haven't been signed, but I wouldn't change my experience for anything, because there's been so much growth and involvement within my wrestling and my work since I started working there. All the minds that I've gotten to pick at and people I've gotten to talk to, I wouldn't be the wrestler I am today. Like, you go back and you watch my first match with Penelope, and then you go back and watch what was the last match I had there? The 6-man that I had in Miami. Like, there's such a difference in the way, not even just the way I wrestle, just the way I walk, the way I enter a ring, the way I respond to certain things that people do to me. Like, it's an incredible difference. And no matter what happens with my career, I will always be very, very grateful to AEW and to Tony Khan for all of that.
That's really lovely to hear, and very significant, particularly when you see that it's a welcoming environment. And everyone's story is different, but you hear stories in the background about people's first impressions of wrestling and getting in the business and not feeling welcomed. So the fact that happened within a major company is major. That's very, very significant. So thank you for sharing that. And now you have all of these different accomplishments, many of them that you have done within a year and a half of just so much strife. And I noticed that you tweeted something recently that was very powerful, and not a lot of people own up to feeling that they're not okay. And you tweeted that you felt that you're not okay. You weren't okay in that moment, but that is okay, and that you will be okay in the future. What do you do to keep yourself motivated, especially in times where you feel like there's just so much chaos happening in the outside world and so many things that you yourself have to do within your career to just kind of center yourself and say, you know what, this is what I have to do to just keep going?
You cut out for a second, so I didn't catch the last part of your question.
What do you do to just keep yourself motivated in tough times? Like, if there's a lot of things happening in the outside world, you have pressures within your career to really, keep going and keep yourself centered. What do you do in order to motivate yourself?
I could give you the easy answer and just say I watch a lot of wrestling. But to be quite honest, I reflect. I'm a big believer in energy and meditating. And so whenever I get to those moments, I reflect on like 10 years ago and who the person I was then and how I was living for others and not living for myself. And the ridiculous and crazy journey that I've been on since I made the decision to become a professional wrestler, because I always joke that it was destiny, because I abbreviated my story earlier, but every single time that my wrestling journey has looked like it's about to come to a halt, fate just throws itself in the mix and says, nah, man, you got to keep going. So for example, when I first made the decision to move to Florida, I couldn't afford it. I was like, I'm going to have to work for a couple of years before I'm able to make this move. And within that moment, or shortly after that moment happened, one of my brothers who used to live in Florida said, hey, I've got a lot of buddies who I miss. I want to move back there. I'll go with you. And then another brother of mine was like, hey, like, I'm really, I've been really depressed since I moved back to Ohio. So I think I need a change. I'm going to go with you too. And then suddenly the obstacle of money was no longer there because I had two people who were willing to share that journey with me. And then as soon as I finally started doing shows and I started getting a little bit of a credit behind my name and people were starting to take notice and starting to book me in higher quality matches against higher or bigger names, COVID happened. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my gosh, all right, this is a sign from like all the bookings started getting canceled. And I'm like, all right, this is a sign from the universe. Maybe it's not meant to be anymore. And then within a month or so after I lost my job and lost all my bookings, Billy Gunn, one of my old trainers, hits me up and says, hey, why haven't you reached out to me about AEW? We want you here. Go get your test done and come here, be here next week. And then even to backtrack a little bit, when we first, I didn't really have a game plan when I moved to Florida. My initial instinct was Florida is where we need to go. And then within 2 weeks, I met a guy at our gym. And, you would think like stranger danger, don't talk to somebody you don't know. But I had the instinct, like, it's okay. Cause he saw me training. He was like, hey, what are you training for? And I said, I want to be a professional wrestler. And he's like, I train at Team 3 Academy. You should come. And so I went there and I met Bubba and he gave me the rundown and I couldn't afford it at the time. And then a couple of weeks later, I get a message saying that they are having a deal and suddenly it was affordable. So it's like all these things that have happened where it's like, I shouldn't be where I am today. And yet every single time one of those moments came up, something happened that made my journey keep going. So when I reflect on, it's a long story short, sorry. When I reflect on all that and I realize all the barriers that should have stopped me that suddenly got removed, it reminds me like this was what I was meant to do. So even on those days when it gets super hard and I'm not sure if I'm capable of it, I reflect on that. I remember that. And I say, no. Just because in this moment I feel like this doesn't mean that this is the overall journey. This was meant to be, because every single time I thought it wasn't meant to be, the universe reminded me that it was. And that's pretty much what has always kept me motivated. And yeah, like I just love it. And I'm not going to lie. My brother sending me a picture of my niece saying that she wants to be me when she grows up. That definitely motivates me too. So yeah, those are the kind of things, but definitely a lot of meditation. And I would say anybody who's getting into wrestling, make sure you're in the right mindset because it is not an easy thing to pursue. There is a lot of rough mental days, wondering if you're good enough. And even on the days where it's not a mental struggle, your body tries to tell you, maybe this isn't for you. And then you got to remind yourself, like, forget the pain. Like, this is what I want. So.
And that's very powerful, particularly for those watching that may want to become professional wrestlers or do something in the wrestling industry, whether it's in ring or outside. And you gave some really great advice. Has there been anyone that has come to you asking for advice on how to become a professional wrestler? And is there anything else that you would advise for them to do, even on the most practical, basic level?
Yeah. So it's really cool that you just asked me that, because a few shows ago, I actually had a young teenager come up to me and said, hey, what's the one piece of advice you would give somebody who wants to become a professional wrestler? And my immediate answer, I heard Bubba's voice in my head because he said this to us when we were in training. Go to a legitimate school, not just run by a wrestler, but run by a wrestler who has had success in this business. There's a lot of schools out there who will take your money and teach you a couple things and say, good job, kid, go out there and do it. And then what happens is the indies get flooded with people who really don't know what they're doing. And then they have to, they start off their journey rough, and then they have to go back and retrain and redo all these things. So the best thing that you can do for yourself, if you want to be a professional wrestler, is find a legitimate school run by legitimate wrestlers who have had success and know what they're doing. I would not be the wrestler I am today if I hadn't trained with Bubba and Devon and Billy Gunn and my other trainers, King Serpentico and Jay Rios. They each brought something very unique and very different to the table, and they prepared me in the absolute best way possible to become a professional wrestler. Because even when I didn't really know what I was doing, they physically and mentally prepared me. And not only just like about in-ring stuff, about, you know, etiquette on the indies and how to treat other wrestlers, how to conduct yourself with promoters and all those things. And they really just prepare you for every single aspect of wrestling. And so that's probably the biggest advice I can give, is it really is important where you start your wrestling journey.
Solid. And I love it. And also, you mentioned your background in dance and theater and karate, martial arts, and now you have wrestling under your belt. Have you ever thought about getting into mixed martial arts? Is that something that has ever crossed your mind?
It definitely is something that I think about once in a blue moon. I don't think I'm there yet. I think right now my passion for wrestling is pretty dominant. It's all I think about. Even as I'm falling asleep, I'm thinking of things I could do. But I'm not opposed to it. I was actually just talking to a buddy of mine the other day, talking about how I missed the training that we used to do. It's very different. And, I definitely would love to get back into it, because I think all forms of fighting come back and help with your wrestling so much. So I'm not opposed to that idea. I just think right time, right place kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you have Thunder Rosa, who can help you,
yes,
when that time comes, right? So that would be a huge, huge boost for you. Are there any matches? I mean, you've had some really amazing matches with like-minded, amazing talent. We have Genocide and the Bunny and Jade Cargill, and you've been in the ring with some talented people like yourself. Is there anyone who you haven't faced yet that you really, really are dying to get in the ring with?
Oh, that's like asking a kid what they want for Christmas. For me, I know I'm a big girl, but I love my technical wrestling. So I'm very, very passionate about getting into the ring with other technical wrestlers. Somebody I would love to wrestle is Roxy. I'm not sure when that will possibly happen, because she's off doing her thing right now, but I would love to get in the ring with her. But in the same token, I also love my big girl matches. Like my recent match with Genocide, that was so fun because we were able to do all kinds of crazy things together. Like, I think that was the first time I've ever done a wheelbarrow arm drag in my matches. Like, I was perfectly capable of doing it for the longest time, but I just never had the right opponent to do it with. And so I was like, so honestly, I want to wrestle everybody. Another person that I would really like to wrestle, her and I trained together on and off, and she's also been out there killing it. And I've never had a chance to really, no, that's not true. I wrestled her a long time ago, but we were in very different places in our career. I would love to wrestle Trisha Dora again. She has been out there killing it. And every single time I see her, I'm just in awe of how, because I remember like where we used to be and seeing where she is now. And I'm just like, oh, she is grinding and she is doing so, so good. Who else? I would also love to go to Japan and just wrestle all the babes there. I keep getting told by all my fellow wrestlers, like, A, I would thrive there, and B, it's very life-changing. Mm-hmm. And I really like to, I find that my style of wrestling is a mixture of a lot of things, but I do love my strikes, and I love like being killed and killing people. So I think that would definitely be a wonderful thing to do. But yeah, those are the first names that come to mind.
And I'm waiting for that Roxy and that Trisha Dora. You got to put that in the universe, which you already have. So now it's just a matter of materializing and envisioning it, right? And
absolutely.
You're billed at 6'1". So I don't know if people realize that, because the TV, it's all about the optics. And I noticed that watching your matches and seeing comments, people know that you're tall, but I don't know if they realize, unless they stood next to you, how tall you are. And as a fellow tall girl, I'm with you on that. Like, you need to have your opponents that are of equal height sometimes to really,
yes,
strike and do what you got to do. So, but that's beautiful.
Ooh, I thought of one more. Yeah. Allison Kay.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
When her and I circled up at NWA, there was just like this energy. And I don't know if you heard the crowd, but they were like, we hadn't even touched each other yet. And they were like, oh. And so I remember her and I, like before we parted ways, after the show was over, we looked at each other and we're like, we need to have a singles match. I don't know when, I don't know where, but we need to have it. So that's another one. Now that my brain's thinking about that.
Allison, we're going to put this out there. I hope you're watching, Allison, because we got to get that. That would be sick. That would be really sick.
Let's book it.
Let's do it. So what's next for you, KiLynn, as we're entering 2022? We got the holidays coming up, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I don't know what you celebrate, but what's next? What's happening for you in 2022?
2022, I'm very, very excited. I'm going to be definitely working with Mission Pro a lot more. I'm not sure what's going on with my career in AEW, but I love them. If they reach out, I'll be there in a heartbeat. But we definitely have a lot of cool bookings coming up. I'm currently in the middle of a championship tournament at a promotion called Capital Championship Wrestling. So I think in 2022, you're going to be seeing the King having a lot more gold around her waist. That's definitely been a big goal of mine. I've been a champion at promotions before, but it's been a very long time because I've just been more worried about getting out there and grinding and improving my craft. But I think now that we're getting to a stronger place in my career, I definitely am looking to add some accolades to my record. And so I'm definitely looking to being able to call myself a champion everywhere I go.
I love it. And you're still the current GWA Women's Champion, is that correct?
Yes, but unfortunately that promotion no longer exists. So yeah, but I have a title match coming up January 8th with Coastal Championship Wrestling. That's the Florida CCW. I have a title match coming up there. And then, like I said, we have the Capital Championship Wrestling Tournament. And then I've said it several times in my promos for Mission Pro. I know Holodead is the current champion, but I'm going to keep busting my butt, adding up the dubs, and hopefully someday soon I will get another title shot and be able to call myself a Mission Pro champion. I would definitely, that would be a very big honor to add MPW champ to my accolades for sure.
Here for it. And we can't wait to see what you get into next in your career beyond 2022. You're doing fantastic things, KiLynn. Your fans love you. We love you here at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And we look forward to seeing everything you do going forward. And thank you so much for being a guest on Face Turn with Candace Cordelia. It's an honor to meet you. And next time, hopefully we meet in person. So I'm putting that into the universe as well.
Yes, I hope so too. It was an honor to be on here.
So welcome, KiLynn. Thank you once again. And thank you everyone for watching Face Turn with Candace Cordelia, where we give you the exclusives and all the scoops with your favorite wrestlers. Stay tuned for more. And until next time, see you later.